Ethan Carter slammed the divorce papers onto the glass table so hard it cracked. "Sign it," he snarled at Emily, then grabbed her wrist and shoved the pen into her hand. 3 years of dead weight ends today. His girlfriend Vanessa laughed from across the room, filming it on her phone. Emily's hand shook not from fear, from rage she'd buried for 1,000 days. Ethan leaned in close, his breath reeking of expensive scotch. "You were always nothing, Emily, a placeholder, and now—" When he ripped the signed papers from her hands. "Now you're less than nothing." He crumpled one copy and threw it at her face. It bounced off her cheek. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, just stared at him with eyes so cold they could freeze hell. Outside, 3 armored SUVs were already waiting. Before we go any further, subscribe right now, watch until the end, and comment your city below. You need to see what happens when a man destroys the one person who held his entire world together. Emily sat alone in that conference room for exactly 47 seconds after Ethan left. Then she pulled out her phone. One call. That's all it took. "It's done," she said quietly. "Initiate Protocol 0. On the other end, a man's voice responded immediately. "Understood, Miss Winslow. Shall we proceed with full activation?" She looked at the divorce papers on the table at Ethan's signature sprawled across the bottom like he'd just signed off on a lunch order. "Yes, all of it." She hung up, stood, smoothed her cardigan, and walked out of that building for the last time as Emily Carter. The moment she stepped onto the New York sidewalk, 3 black armored SUVs pulled up in perfect formation. Doors opened. A man in a tailored suit stepped out and bowed, not a casual nod, a full bow. "Miss Winslow, your security detail is in position. We've been waiting for your authorization." Emily glanced back at the building where Ethan probably still thought he'd won. "He has no idea, does he?" The man allowed himself the smallest smile. "No, ma'am, he does not." Meanwhile, 14 blocks away, Ethan was already at a rooftop bar with Vanessa popping champagne like he'd just closed the deal of a lifetime. "To freedom!" he shouted, clinking glasses with her. Vanessa laughed that high-pitched giggle that used to charm him. "I can't believe you were married to that mouse for 3 years. What were you thinking?" Ethan shrugged, already halfway through his second glass. "I was young, stupid. She was there. But now—" He leaned back, spreading his arms wide. "Now I'm about to land Obsidian Group. Do you know what that means? We're talking about the biggest private equity firm in the world. Once I close this deal, I'll be untouchable." Vanessa ran a finger along his collar. "And I'll be right there with you, baby." He kissed her, tasting expensive lipstick and entitlement. Everything in his world felt perfect, clean, finally aligned with who he thought he deserved to be. 2 weeks passed. Ethan moved into Vanessa's penthouse, a glass tower overlooking Central Park. Every morning he woke up to skyline views and fresh-pressed suits. His career was exploding. His boss had just promoted him to senior VP. And tonight was the Manhattan Charity Gala, the event where New York's elite gathered to pretend they cared about the poor while bidding on art they'd never hang. But more importantly, it was where Obsidian Group's representatives were supposed to be. This was Ethan's moment, his chance to shake the right hands, make the right impression, and secure his future. He arrived with Vanessa on his arm, her in a red gown that cost more than most people's cars. The room was all crystal chandeliers and champagne towers. Ethan worked the crowd like a politician, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, complimenting ties he didn't care about. Then the room went quiet. Not gradually, all at once, like someone had hit a mute button on 300 people. Ethan turned toward the staircase, and his brain short-circuited. A woman was descending. Slowly, deliberately. She wore a gown that looked like it had been embroidered with actual diamonds, catching every light in the room. Her hair was swept back sleek and severe. Her posture was perfect, cold, untouchable, and her face, Ethan's stomach dropped straight through the floor. It was Emily, but it wasn't. This woman looked like Emily, but she moved like a queen, no like a conqueror. Every step she took radiated power so absolute that people literally stepped back to make room. Ethan's hand went slack. His champagne glass slipped shattering on the marble floor. Nobody even looked at him. They were all staring at her. Vanessa grabbed his arm. "Ethan, who is that?" He couldn't answer. couldn't breathe, because the woman who used to make him coffee in sweatpants, who used to apologize for existing, was now standing at the center of the room while a man in a tuxedo stepped forward and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, Emily Winslow, CEO of Obsidian Group." The applause was immediate, deafening. Ethan felt like he was underwater. CEO, Obsidian Group, Emily. The three words didn't fit together. They couldn't. This had to be a mistake, some kind of joke. But then her eyes found his across the room, and there was no warmth in them, no recognition, just a cold, clinical assessment, like she was looking at a bug she was deciding whether to step on. She didn't smile, didn't frown, just looked at him for exactly 2 seconds, then turned away to greet a senator. Ethan's knees almost gave out. Vanessa was talking, her voice shrill and panicked, but he couldn't hear her. All he could hear was his own heartbeat pounding in his ears and a single thought screaming through his brain. I just divorced the most powerful woman in New York. He stumbled toward his bar, ordered a whiskey, downed it, ordered another. His phone buzzed. A text from his boss. Did you know Emily Winslow was your ex-wife? Then another from a colleague. Dude, are you seeing this? Then another and another. Within 10 minutes, his phone was exploding. But it was the email that made his blood turn to ice. Subject line, Access Revocation Notice. He opened it with shaking hands. Dear Mr. Carter, effective immediately. Your executive access has been suspended pending review. Please report to HR at 9 a.m. Monday. He read it 3 times. It still didn't make sense. Suspended why he'd just been promoted 2 weeks ago. Unless. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Mr. Carter, a woman's voice crisp and professional. This is Rebecca Chen from Obsidian Group's legal team. We're calling to inform you that as of 6 p.m. today, Obsidian Group has acquired a controlling interest in Marlowe Financial. That's your employer, correct? Ethan's throat closed. What? We completed the acquisition approximately 4 hours ago. Ms. Winslow will be reviewing all executive personnel by end of week. We wanted to give you advance notice. The line went dead. Ethan stood there, phone pressed to his ear, while the gala continued around him. People laughing, drinking, networking. And across the room, Emily was shaking hands with the mayor, utterly untouchable, while Ethan's entire world collapsed in real time. He'd thought he was cutting loose dead weight. He'd thought he was upgrading. But the truth was so much worse. He hadn't left Emily. He'd just lost everything he never knew he had. And she hadn't even needed to say a word. Vanessa's penthouse smelled like victory that night. Ethan poured himself another scotch, his third since they'd gotten home from the gala, and tried to ignore the way his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Vanessa was in the bedroom already asleep, but he couldn't even close his eyes. Every time he did, he saw Emily descending those stairs. Emily in diamonds. Emily with that ice-cold stare that had looked straight through him like he was nothing. His phone buzzed again. Another message. He'd stopped reading them an hour ago, but this one was from his college roommate, Jake. Bro Bloomberg just posted an article. Your ex-wife is worth how much? Ethan's finger hovered over the link. He didn't want to know. Knowing would make it real. But he clicked anyway. The headline punched him in the gut. Emily Winslow, the trillion-dollar heiress who built an empire in secret. The article had photos. Emily at 18 boarding a private jet. Emily at 22 sitting in a Harvard Business School lecture hall. Emily at 25 signing documents that transferred control of 7 corporations under the Obsidian umbrella. And then one photo that made Ethan's scotch glass slip right out of his hand. Emily on their wedding day. That simple courthouse ceremony he'd insisted on because he'd said big weddings were wasteful. She was smiling in the photo, holding his hand, wearing a dress she'd bought off the rack for $200. The caption read, Winslow reportedly hid her identity throughout her marriage, living on her husband's modest salary while managing a global portfolio in secret. Ethan ran to the bathroom and threw up. Monday morning arrived like an execution date. Ethan stood outside the Marlowe Financial Building at 8:45, staring up at the glass tower he'd walked into confidently for 5 years. His card wouldn't work at the entrance. The security guard, Tom, who used to wave him through with a smile, now avoided eye contact. Sorry, Mr. Carter, you're not in the system anymore. You'll need to check in with reception. Reception. Like he was a visitor, like he was nobody. He waited in the lobby for 23 minutes before someone from HR finally came down. Not his usual HR rep. A woman he'd never seen before, young professional with a tablet tucked under her arm and zero warmth in her expression. "Mr. Carter, follow me, please." She led him to a conference room. Not his office. A conference room. The kind where they fired people. "Have a seat." She didn't sit. Just stood there, tablet in hand. "As of this morning, your position as Senior Vice President has been terminated. Obsidian Group's audit revealed several concerning discrepancies in your division's reporting." Ethan's blood went cold. "What discrepancies? I've never—" "You approved 17 expense reports last quarter that violated company policy. You signed off on 3 client contracts without proper legal review, and you accepted gifts from vendors totaling over $15,000, which violates our ethics code." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of everything. His signatures, his approvals, his mistakes. "These were standard practice," Ethan stammered. "Everyone does this. My boss told me to—" "Your former boss was also terminated this morning," the woman interrupted, "along with 4 other executives. Obsidian Group has zero tolerance for policy violations." Ethan felt the room spinning. "So, what now? You're firing me." "You have 2 options. Accept immediate termination with a standard severance package, or accept reassignment to a junior analyst position while under probationary review." She said it like she was reading a grocery list. No emotion, no mercy. Ethan's pride screamed at him to walk out, to tell them to shove their junior analyst position where the sun didn't shine. But then he thought about his bank account, about the lease on his Porsche, about the credit cards he'd maxed out furnishing Vanessa's penthouse. "What's the salary?" he heard himself ask. $52,000 annually. He'd been making $400,000. "I'll take it," he whispered. The woman nodded once. "Report to the 14th floor. Your supervisor is expecting you." She left without another word. Ethan sat there alone, staring at his reflection in the polished conference table, and wondered how his life had collapsed so completely in 72 hours. The 14th floor was where junior analysts worked. Cramped cubicles, flickering fluorescent lights, the smell of burnt coffee and anxiety. Ethan's new supervisor was a kid who looked about 12, wearing a wrinkled button-down and a smirk that said he knew exactly who Ethan used to be. "Mr. Carter, welcome to the team. I'm Danny Chen. I actually heard you speak at the company retreat last year. That presentation on market diversification, inspiring stuff." The sarcasm was thick enough to cut. Danny handed him a stack of receipts 6 inches tall. "Your first assignment. We need these expense reports audited and verified by end of day. Make sure every receipt matches the submitted amount. Any discrepancies get flagged in the system." Me. Ethan stared at the stack. This was intern work. This was what they gave business school freshmen to teach them humility. "You're joking." Danny's smirk widened. "Dead serious. Oh, and the break room's down the hall. Coffee's free, but you'll need to bring your own mug. Budget cuts." He walked away, whistling. Ethan spent the next 8 hours checking receipts, taxi fares, lunch orders, hotel stays. His eyes burned. His back ached from the cheap desk chair. Around him, actual junior analysts whispered and pointed, not even trying to hide it. By 6 p.m., he'd finished maybe a third of the stack. His phone buzzed. Vanessa. "Where are you? We're supposed to meet the Hendersons for dinner at 7. He'd completely forgotten. The Hendersons were old money. Vanessa had been angling for an introduction for months. "I can't make it. Work thing." "What work thing? I thought you got promoted." Ethan closed his eyes. He hadn't told her yet. Hadn't figured out how. "Something came up. I'll explain later." "Ethan, this dinner is important. They're considering investing in that startup I told you about." "I said I can't make it, Vanessa." He hung up before she could respond. That night, Ethan rode the subway home for the first time in 3 years. His Porsche had been repossessed that afternoon. Apparently, his bank had frozen his accounts pending investigation into suspicious activity. He'd called them 4 times. Every time he got put on hold for 20 minutes, then disconnected. The subway was packed. He stood pressed against strangers, holding a pole with one hand, his dignity in tatters. A woman next to him was reading the New York Times, the business section, And there on the front page was a photo of Emily shaking hands with the governor. The headline, Winslow announces $5 billion infrastructure initiative. $5 billion. She was pledging $5 billion to rebuild schools and bridges, and Ethan couldn't even access his checking account. He got back to Vanessa's penthouse at 9. She was waiting in the living room, arms crossed, still in her cocktail dress. You humiliated me tonight. Do you know how that looked? Showing up alone after I told everyone my boyfriend was some Wall Street hotshot? Ethan dropped his bag. He was too tired for this. Too broken. I got demoted, Vanessa. Actually worse than demoted. I'm basically an intern now. She blinked. What? Emily bought my company. She had me reassigned to junior analyst. I make $52,000 a year now. My car's gone. My accounts are frozen. I'm done. The silence that followed was worse than screaming. Vanessa just stared at him, and he watched in real time as her expression shifted from confusion to disgust. You're poor. It wasn't a question. I'm not poor, you make $52,000 a year. Ethan, my purse costs more than that. She laughed, but it was hollow, mean. Oh my God, this is what I left Marcus for. I thought you were going somewhere. I can fix this, Ethan said, hating how desperate he sounded. I'll figure something out. I just need time. Time. Vanessa grabbed her phone. I don't have time. I have a charity auction on Wednesday, a yacht party on Saturday. I can't show up to those things with a guy who takes the subway. She walked to the bedroom, came back 2 minutes later with his suitcase already packed. She must have done it while he was at work. Vanessa, come on. She opened the door. Get out. You're really doing this? She didn't even look at him. You said Emily was nothing. You said she was mediocre. Looks like you were talking about yourself. Ethan stood in the hallway of that luxury building with his suitcase at his feet and nowhere to go. His phone was at 8% battery. His credit cards were maxed. His bank accounts were frozen. He scrolled through his contacts looking for anyone who might let him crash for the night. But every name he saw was someone he'd used, someone he'd climbed over, someone who'd celebrate his downfall. He ended up at a motel in Queens, $49 a night. The room smelled like mildew and broken dreams. The TV only got 3 channels. The shower sputtered brown water for 30 seconds before running clear. Ethan sat on the edge of the stained mattress and finally let himself cry. Not quiet tears, gut-wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. Everything he'd built, every connection he'd made, every win he'd celebrated, it was all built on sand. And Emily had just pulled the foundation. The next morning, his phone rang at 6 a.m. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Mr. Carter, a man's voice, professional, cold. This is Robert Gaines from the Securities and Exchange Commission. We're calling regarding your involvement in the Vanessa Monroe investment scheme. Ethan sat up so fast his head spun. What scheme? We have evidence that you approved fraudulent transfers totaling $3.2 million through Marlowe Financial on behalf of Ms. Monroe. We'll need you to come in for questioning. I didn't approve anything fraudulent. I don't even know what you're talking about. We have your signature on 12 documents, Mr. Carter. We'll send you the subpoena details shortly. Don't leave the state. The line went dead. Ethan stared at his phone, then opened his email. There it was. Subject line, Federal Subpoena. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside were scanned copies of transfer authorizations, his signature, his employee ID number. $3.2 million moved through accounts he'd approved without reading them carefully because Vanessa had asked him to, and he'd wanted to impress her. Prison. The word flashed in his mind like a neon sign. He was going to prison. His phone rang again. Different number. He answered, praying it wasn't another federal agent. Mr. Carter, this is Jessica Park from Obsidian Group. Miss Winslow would like to meet with you this afternoon. 2 p.m. Her office. Ethan's throat went dry. Why? She didn't say. Will you be available? What choice did he have? Yes. Good. A car will pick you up at 1:30. Don't be late. The car that arrived was a black Mercedes. Not armored like the SUVs from the divorce, but still nicer than anything Ethan could afford now. The driver didn't speak, just opened the door and waited. The drive to Obsidian Tower took 40 minutes through Manhattan traffic. Ethan spent the entire ride trying to figure out what Emily wanted. To gloat, to destroy him further, to watch him beg. The tower itself was glass and steel, 70 stories of intimidation. Inside, the lobby was all marble and modern art. A receptionist directed him to a private elevator that required a key card. The driver handed him one. 68th floor. The elevator ride felt like ascending to judgment. When the doors opened, he stepped into an office that looked like it belonged in a museum. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Art that probably cost millions. And behind a massive desk, Emily. She didn't stand when he entered. Didn't smile. Just gestured to the chair across from her. Sit. He sat. She slid a folder across the desk. Open it. Inside were the same documents the SEC had sent him. The fraudulent transfers. His signatures. Vanessa set you up, Emily said flatly. She used you to move money through Marlowe for her boyfriend's Ponzi scheme. You were too arrogant to read what you were signing. Ethan's hands trembled. How do you... I own the company, Ethan. I know everything. She leaned back in her chair, studying him like a specimen under glass. You're facing 5 to 7 years in federal prison. The SEC has an airtight case. Your lawyer, assuming you can afford one, will tell you to plead guilty and hope for leniency. Ethan felt tears burning behind his eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm going to offer you a deal. Ethan's voice came out as barely a whisper. What kind of deal? Emily opened a drawer and pulled out another document. This one was thicker. Legal-sized pages bound together with a black clip. She slid it across the desk with the same cold precision she'd used for everything else. I'll make the SEC investigation disappear. I'll ensure Vanessa and her boyfriend take the fall, not you. I'll clear your name completely. Ethan's heart hammered. Why would you do that? Because you're going to work for me, not at Marlowe. Here, at Obsidian. She tapped the document. This is a 5-year employment contract. Non-negotiable terms. You'll start at the absolute bottom. You'll do whatever I tell you to do, whenever I tell you to do it. You'll earn minimum wage for the first year. After that, we'll see if you're worth more. Ethan stared at the contract like it was a snake. Minimum wage, Emily, I can't survive on. You'll survive on exactly what I survived on while you spent my evenings criticizing how I folded your shirts. Her voice didn't rise, but the venom in it was unmistakable. You told me I was mediocre, that I had no ambition, no value. So let's see what you're actually worth when nobody's holding doors open for you anymore. He wanted to argue, to tell her this was insane, that he had rights, that she couldn't just play God with his life. But the SEC folder sat right there between them. 5 to 7 years in federal prison. Or this. What would I be doing, he asked. Whatever needs doing. Today that might mean filing documents. Tomorrow it might mean cleaning the executive break room. Next week, it could be serving drinks at a donor event. I don't care if you went to Princeton, Ethan. I don't care that you used to have an office with a view. You'll do the work, you'll keep your mouth shut, and you'll learn what it actually means to earn something. Ethan's hands shook as he picked up the contract. The terms were brutal. 5 years, minimum wage for year 1, performance-based increases only if approved by direct supervisor, no benefits for the first 6 months, termination clause that could be triggered at any time for any reason. And at the bottom, a line that made his stomach turn. Employee acknowledges this opportunity is an act of extraordinary mercy and agrees to hold employer harmless for any emotional distress resulting from employment duties. She was protecting herself legally in case he tried to sue for humiliation, because she knew what she was about to do to him. He looked up at her. Those eyes that used to watch him with something like hope were now just ice. And if I say no... Emily picked up her phone and started typing. Then I call the SEC right now and tell them you're uncooperative. You'll be in custody by tonight. Your arraignment will be Thursday. Bond will be set at something you definitely can't afford. And you'll sit in a cell until your trial, which will take about 18 months. By then, Vanessa will have fled the country, and you'll be the only one left to blame. She said it all without looking at him, just kept typing on her phone like she was ordering lunch. Ethan felt his last shred of pride dying in his chest. Where do I sign? Emily slid a pen across the desk. The same pen he'd thrown at her in the divorce. He recognized the dent on the clip. She'd kept it. He signed on every line she'd marked with a red tab. When he finished, Emily took the contract back, had her assistant notarize it on the spot, and filed it in her desk. You start tomorrow, 6 a.m., report to facilities management on the 3rd floor. Bring work boots if you have them. If not, buy some. I don't care how. 6 a.m., Emily, I don't even have. Not my problem. Figure it out. That's what people do when they're not handed everything. She pressed a button on her desk. The door opened behind him. Marcus will see you out. The same driver who'd brought him here stood waiting. Ethan stood slowly, legs numb, brain screaming. Emily? She didn't look up from her computer. It's Ms. Winslow, and we're done here. Marcus drove him back to the motel in Queens in complete silence. When they pulled up, Ethan just sat there staring at the cracked neon sign advertising hourly rates. Sir, Marcus said quietly, we've arrived. Ethan got out and watched the Mercedes drive away. He climbed the exterior stairs to his room on the 2nd floor and locked the door behind him. Then he opened his suitcase and pulled out the only pair of jeans he owned and the old work boots from a college construction job. He'd have to wear those tomorrow. He had $12 in his wallet and 8% battery on his phone. He sat on the bed and laughed, not because anything was funny, because the alternative was screaming. That night he barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily's face. Not from today, from 3 years ago, their wedding night. They'd been at a cheap hotel because that's all he could afford as a junior analyst. She'd been so happy, so genuinely, innocently happy. She'd ordered room service champagne with her own money, and they'd drunk it out of plastic cups because the hotel didn't have real glasses. I can't believe I get to spend my whole life with you, she'd whispered. And he'd kissed her and thought the exact same thing. When had that changed? When had he started seeing her as less than? He tried to pinpoint the exact moment, but it was more like a slow rot. The promotions that came while she stayed home, the colleagues who asked why his wife didn't work, the parties where other men had wives in designer dresses while Emily wore the same 3 outfits on rotation. He'd started being embarrassed by her, started wishing she was different, started believing the lie that he deserved better, and she'd let him believe it. For 3 years, she'd played the role perfectly while running a $1 trillion empire in secret. The thought made him nauseous. How many phone calls had she taken in the bathroom that he'd assumed were her mother? How many late nights had she claimed insomnia while probably managing international acquisitions she'd hidden in plain sight, and he'd been too arrogant to see her? His alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. He showered in lukewarm water, dressed in his jeans and boots, and took the subway to Midtown. He arrived at Obsidian Tower at 5:45. The facilities manager was a woman named Rosa, 60 years old with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen every kind of corporate nonsense. She looked at his paperwork, looked at him, and raised an eyebrow. You're the ex-husband. It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. Everybody knows. Whole building's been talking about it for 3 days. She handed him a gray jumpsuit and a name tag. Put this on. You'll be working with Luis today. He'll show you what to do. And Carter. She leaned in close. I don't care who you used to be. Down here, you're nobody. You do the work, you do it right, or you're gone. Understood. Understood. Luis was a maintenance tech who'd worked at Obsidian for 12 years. He was short, stocky, and had zero patience for incompetence. First job, he said, handing Ethan a mop and bucket. Executive bathroom on 68 flooded last night. Someone flushed something they shouldn't have. We're cleaning it up. 68. Emily's floor, of course. Ethan spent the next 2 hours on his hands and knees scrubbing a bathroom floor while Luis barked instructions. The smell was unbearable. His back screamed, his hands soft from years of desk work blistered inside the rubber gloves. Around 9 a.m., he heard voices outside. He recognized one of them, Emily. She was giving a tour to potential investors, showing off the executive level. The bathroom door was propped open. She walked past with 3 men in expensive suits talking about quarterly projections. She glanced and saw Ethan on the floor with a scrub brush and didn't even pause, just kept walking. One of the investors noticed him, though. You run a tight ship, Ms. Winslow. Even got your cleaning crew working overtime. Emily smiled. "We believe in accountability at every level." They disappeared down the hall. Luis grunted. "She's cold, that one, but fair. You do good work, she notices. You slack off, you're done." He tossed Ethan a new scrub brush. "Baseboard's next, and don't miss the corners." By lunch, Ethan's hands were bleeding. He'd peeled off the gloves to find raw skin and burst blisters. Rosa saw them and threw him a first aid kit. "Tape those up. You've got 3 more floors this afternoon." He wanted to quit, to walk out and never come back. But where would he go? What would he do? Prison was still waiting if he broke this contract, so he taped his hands and got back to work. That night back at the motel, he counted his pay. Emily had set him up on daily payroll, $15 an hour, 8-hour shift, $120 minus taxes. He cleared $96. The motel cost $49 per night. Food cost another $20 if he was careful. That left him $27. At this rate, he'd never save enough to get out. Week 2 was worse. Emily had him reassigned to event services. There was a major donor gala on Friday, and he was part of the serving staff. Black vest, white shirt, bow tie. He served champagne to people he used to network with. Every single one of them recognized him. Some looked away in embarrassment. Others smirked. One guy, a hedge fund manager named Prescott, actually laughed out loud. "Ethan Carter, I heard you'd fallen on hard times, but this is rich. Hey, can you grab me another shrimp puff?" Ethan gritted his teeth and grabbed the tray. As he turned, he saw Emily across the room talking to a senator. She was radiant, powerful, untouchable. And he was invisible, just another server in a sea of hired help. The gala went until midnight. By the time cleanup was done, it was almost 2 a.m. Ethan took the subway back to Queens, collapsed on the motel bed still in his uniform, and slept 4 hours before his alarm went off for the next shift. 3 months in, something shifted. Not dramatically, not some big revelation, just a quiet, uncomfortable realization that crept up on him while he was scrubbing a conference room floor at 6 a.m. He was good at this, not the cleaning itself, but the rhythm of it, the simplicity, do the work, do it right, go home. No politics, no backstabbing, no pretending. For the first time in his adult life, his value was tied directly to his effort, not his connections. And weirdly, there was freedom in that, Luis noticed. "You're getting faster," he said one morning. "You actually paying attention now." Ethan shrugged. "Trying to." "Good. Maybe you're not completely useless." Coming from Luis, that was a compliment. Month 4. Rosa pulled him aside. "Winslow wants to see you. 68th floor, 2 p.m. Ethan's stomach dropped. He hadn't spoken to Emily since signing the contract, hadn't even been in the same room except when he was cleaning it. "Did she say why?" Rosa shrugged. "Above my pay grade. But you better shower first. You smell like bleach." At 2 p.m. sharp, Ethan stood outside Emily's office in the same cheap khakis and button-down he'd worn to his first day at Marlowe a lifetime ago. Her assistant Jessica waved him in. Emily sat behind her desk reading something on her tablet. She didn't look up. "Sit." He sat. She finally looked at him. Really looked. Taking inventory. "You've lost weight." He had. 20 pounds, probably. Manual labor and a budget diet did that. "Yeah. Your hands." She nodded at the scars and calluses. "Those are new." He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. Emily set down her tablet. "I'm reassigning you." His heart raced. This was it. She was firing him, sending him to the SEC. To where? Community outreach. "We run a job training program for formerly incarcerated individuals. You'll be teaching basic financial literacy." She slid a folder across the desk. "Twice a week. Evenings. You'll still do your facilities shift during the day." Ethan opened the folder. Course materials, schedules, a list of participants. "Why me?" "Because you understand failure now, and because people who've lost everything can smell a fake a mile away. You're not fake anymore. You're just broken. That makes you useful." It should have felt like an insult. Maybe it was, but Ethan found himself nodding. "Okay. One more thing." Emily's voice dropped. "Next month, there's a charity event. Black tie. Donors expect to see executive leadership present. You'll be there." Ethan blinked. "As a server, as my +1. The room tilted. What? You heard me. You'll wear a tux I'll have tailored for you. You'll stand next to me. You'll smile when spoken to. You'll demonstrate to every person in that room that you are no longer the man who threw divorce papers in my face. You're someone who learned. Do you understand? Ethan's throat was dry. Emily, why are you doing this? For the first time since the divorce, something flickered in her eyes. Not warmth exactly, but maybe the memory of it. Because I didn't spend 3 years of my life married to you for nothing. There was a reason I chose you, Ethan. I'm giving you the chance to remember what that was. Ethan walked out of Emily's office with the folder clutched in his hands and his brain unable to process what had just happened. Her +1. To a black tie event. With the same people who'd watched him serve shrimp puffs 4 months ago. He didn't know if this was mercy or a new kind of torture. The first financial literacy class was that Thursday night. Ethan showed up at the community center in Queens with his printed materials and absolutely no idea what he was doing. The room smelled like old coffee and floor cleaner. 12 people sat in folding chairs, all of them looking at him with the kind of suspicion that came from being lied to by people in suits their whole lives. Rosa had warned him. These weren't college kids. These were men and women who'd served time, lost everything, and were trying to claw their way back to something resembling normal. A guy in the front row, maybe 40 arms covered in faded tattoos, spoke first. You're the teacher. Ethan set down his folder. Yeah, I'm Ethan. You ever been locked up? No. Ever been broke, like really broke? Not, I can't afford the fancy car broke, but I gotta choose between food and rent broke. Ethan thought about the motel, about counting coins for the subway, about bleeding hands and $96 a day. Yeah, I have. The guy leaned back, studying him. We'll see. Ethan opened his folder and started talking about credit scores. Within 5 minutes, he could tell he was losing them. The material was too corporate, too detached. These people didn't need a lecture about FICO algorithms. They needed survival tools, so he closed the folder. You know what? Forget this. He grabbed a marker and went to the whiteboard. How many of you have bank accounts right now? 3 hands went up out of 12. Okay, let's start there. Why don't the rest of you have accounts? A woman in the back, maybe 30, raised her hand. They want 2 forms of ID. I got 1, and they want a minimum deposit I don't got. How much? $25. Ethan wrote it on the board. $25. The difference between being in the system or outside it. What else? For the next 90 minutes, they talked. Really talked. About check cashing places that took 8%. About payday loans with 400% interest. About landlords who only took cash and employers who paid under the table. Ethan didn't have all the answers, but he listened. And when he did offer advice, it wasn't theoretical. It was based on the last 4 months of his own life. How to stretch $70 across a week. How to negotiate with a landlord when you're 3 days late. How to rebuild when everything's gone. At the end, the guy with the tattoos came up to him. You did aight. You coming back? Every Thursday. Cool. Bring coffee next time. The stuff here tastes like dirt. Ethan smiled, actually smiled. Deal. He started bringing coffee, and donuts when he could afford them. By week 3, attendance had grown to 18. By week 5, 22. People started staying after to ask questions. Real questions. Not about credit scores, but about life. One guy, Marcus, asked how to tell his kid he couldn't afford birthday presents this year. Ethan didn't have a good answer, but he stayed an extra hour just listening. That night on the subway ride back to the motel, something clicked. These people weren't projects. They were him. Just a few bad breaks, a few wrong choices, and he'd have been sitting in those same chairs. The charity gala was 3 weeks away. Emily had a tailor come to the Obsidian offices to fit Ethan for a tux. The tailor was professional efficient and clearly confused about why he was measuring someone in a maintenance jumpsuit. Arms up, please. Ethan raised his arms. The measuring tape went around his chest, his waist, his inseam. You've lost significant weight since your last formal fitting. Yeah. We'll need to take in the shoulders and add length to the sleeves. Your frame has changed. The tailor made notes on his tablet. Ms. Winslow requested classic black, single button, notch lapel. Does that work for you? Ethan almost laughed, like he had a say in this. Sure. The tux arrived 2 days before the event. Ethan tried it on in his motel room and barely recognized himself. The man in the mirror looked lean, tired, older, but also somehow more real than the guy who used to spend $400 on haircuts. He took it off carefully and hung it on the back of the door, staring at it like it might bite him. The night of the gala, a car picked him up at 6. Not Marcus this time. A different driver. Younger. Didn't say a word. Just drove him to the venue, a museum in Manhattan that had been rented out for the night. Ethan walked in through the service entrance like he had 4 months ago, but this time, Jessica was waiting. "Ms. Winslow is upstairs. Follow me." She led him through back hallways to a private room where Emily was getting ready. She stood in front of a full-length mirror in a gown that probably cost more than Ethan's yearly salary. Midnight blue, elegant, devastating. Her hair was up, diamond earrings. She looked like she'd been born into this world. When she saw him in the mirror, she turned. "The tux fits." "Yeah." She walked over, adjusted his bow tie without asking, and stepped back to examine him. "You look different." "So do you." "I always looked like this, Ethan. You just never noticed." She picked up her clutch. "Here's how tonight works. You stay next to me unless I tell you otherwise. You smile, you shake hands. You do not apologize for anything. You do not explain yourself. If someone asks what you do, you tell them you work in community outreach for Obsidian. That's it. Understood." "Understood." "And Ethan?" She looked him straight in the eye. "Don't embarrass me." They walked into the gala together. The room went silent for about 3 seconds. Then the whispers started. Ethan could feel every eye on him, could hear the fragments of conversation. "Is that her ex-husband? What's he doing here? I heard he was bankrupt." She took him back. "No way." Emily's hand slipped through his arm. Not affectionate. Possessive. She was making a statement. They made the rounds. Emily introduced him to senators, tech CEOs, old money donors. Every single one of them looked at Ethan with barely concealed curiosity. A few were bold enough to ask, "So Ethan, what brings you back into Emily's orbit?" He stuck to the script. "I work in community outreach for Obsidian, job training programs, financial literacy, that kind of thing." "How noble. Career change from finance." "Something like that." One older woman, a board member for some foundation, wasn't buying it. "I heard you two divorced rather publicly, and now you're here together. That's quite the reconciliation." Emily answered before Ethan could. "We're not reconciled. Ethan works for me. Tonight he's here because I asked him to be. That's all there is to it." She said it with a smile, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. The woman backed off. They found a quiet corner near the bar. Emily grabbed 2 champagne glasses from a passing server and handed one to Ethan. "You're doing fine. This is hell. This is consequences." She took a sip. "Everyone in this room knows what you did. They know you lost everything, and now they're watching to see if you've learned anything or if you're just playing a part." "Which one do you think I'm doing?" She looked at him for a long moment. "I don't know yet." That's when Vanessa walked in. Ethan saw her before Emily did. She was on the arm of some new guy, silver-haired, probably 20 years older, dripping money. She was laughing loud and performative, working the room like she owned it. Then she saw Ethan. Her smile faltered, just for a second. But it was enough. She whispered something to her date and started walking over. "Oh, God," Ethan muttered. Emily turned, saw Vanessa approaching, and her expression didn't change at all. "Let her come." Vanessa stopped 3 feet away, looking between them with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. Shock, maybe, or calculation. "Ethan, wow, I didn't expect to see you here." "Vanessa." She looked at Emily, recognition dawning. "Wait, you're Emily Winslow. The Emily Winslow." She laughed high and brittle. "Oh my God, Ethan, you really traded down and didn't even know it, did you?" Emily's voice was calm, cold. "And you committed securities fraud and didn't even cover your tracks. The SEC has enough evidence to put you away for 15 years. Your boyfriend there," she nodded at the silver-haired man, "he's already cooperating with federal investigators. They arrested him 2 hours ago. He's out on bond. You will be too. Probably by Monday." Vanessa's face went white. "You're lying. Check your phone." Vanessa pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Ethan watched her read whatever was on the screen. Her knees actually buckled. No, this isn't." Emily took a step closer. Her voice dropped so only the three of them could hear. "You used Ethan. You set him up to take the fall for your fraud, but I made sure the investigators knew the truth. So congratulations, Vanessa. You're about to experience consequences for the first time in your life. I'd start looking for a good lawyer." Vanessa looked at Ethan, desperate. "You let her do this to me after everything." Ethan thought about the motel, the bleeding hands, the nights he'd wondered if he'd survive. "You threw me out with a packed suitcase and called me nothing. So, yeah, I let her do this." Vanessa's date appeared, grabbed her arm. "We're leaving. Now." They were gone in seconds. Emily turned back to the party like nothing had happened. "Champagne." Ethan just stared at her. "You planned that." "I plan everything." She handed him a fresh glass. "The question is, did you enjoy it?" He wanted to say yes, wanted to feel vindicated, but all he felt was tired. "Not really." "Good. Revenge doesn't fix anything. It just proves you can survive long enough to watch other people fall." She clinked her glass against his. "Now come on. There's a donor I need you to meet." The rest of the night blurred together. More handshakes, more small talk, more scrutiny. By 11, Ethan's face hurt from forcing smiles. Emily finally released him around midnight. "You can go. The car will take you home." "You're staying. I have 3 more meetings. This is my world, Ethan. It doesn't stop just because you're tired." She paused. "You did well tonight. Better than I expected." It was the closest thing to a compliment she'd given him in months. "Thanks." He rode back to Queens in silence, changed out of the tux, and lay on the motel bed staring at the water-stained ceiling. His phone buzzed. A text from Luis. "Rosa says you got promoted. Day shift supervisor starting Monday. 42,000 a year. Don't screw it up." Ethan read it 3 times. 42,000. Still nothing compared to what he used to make, but it was something. Progress. He texted back. "Thanks for everything." Luis replied immediately. "You earned it. Now get some sleep. Monday's gonna suck." 3 months later, Ethan was running the entire facilities team at Obsidian. Not because Emily handed it to him, but because he'd worked for it. He'd shown up every day, done the work, earned respect from people like Rosa and Luis, who didn't give it freely. His financial literacy classes had expanded to 3 nights a week. The community center had asked him to develop a full curriculum. He was sleeping better, eating better. The motel had become a cheap apartment, nothing fancy. But it was his. Then one Tuesday morning, Jessica called him to Emily's office. He took the elevator up, knocked, walked in. Emily sat at her desk with a document in front of her. She slid it across without preamble. "Read it." It was the contract he'd signed 8 months ago, the 5-year employment agreement. Across the top, stamped in red ink, "Paid in full." Ethan looked up. "I don't understand." "You've completed the terms. You worked, you learned, you changed. The contract is fulfilled. You're free to go." She pulled out another document. "This is an offer for a permanent position. Community Outreach Director, $85,000 a year, full benefits. You'd oversee all our job training programs, expand them nationally. Or," she pushed both documents toward him, "you walk away, start over somewhere else. Clean slate, your choice." Ethan stared at both papers. Freedom. After 8 months of hell, she was just letting him go. Why now? "Because last week someone offered you $5 million to sell information about Obsidian's acquisition targets, and you reported it to compliance instead of taking it." She leaned back. "That's when I knew you'd actually changed. The old Ethan would have taken the money and run. He had been tempted. God, he'd been tempted. $5 million would have solved every problem. But he'd thought about Marcus from his Thursday class, about the guys on his facilities team, about the kids in the job training program who looked at him like proof that people could rebuild. And he'd called compliance. "I didn't do it for you." "I know. You did it because it was right. That's why you're ready." She stood up. "So what's it going to be, Ethan, freedom or purpose?" He looked at the termination agreement, then at the job offer. His hand hovered between them. Everything in him that remembered Wall Street, remembered status and power and easy money, screamed to take the termination and run. Build something new. Forget this chapter ever happened. But then he thought about Thursday night, about the faces in those folding chairs, about Louise teaching him how to fix a boiler, about Rosa trusting him with her team, about becoming someone real instead of someone successful. He picked up the job offer and signed it. Emily watched him, her expression unreadable. "You're sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure." She took the signed offer and filed it. "Then we have work to do. Market's open in 3 hours. There's a restructuring proposal on your desk. I need your analysis by noon." Ethan stood, started to walk out, then stopped. "Emily." "What?" "Thank you for not giving up on me when I deserved it." For the first time in 8 months, she almost smiled. "Don't thank me yet. You're about to find out how much harder real work is than what you've been doing." Ethan walked out of Emily's office with the signed job offer and went straight to his new desk on the 42nd floor. Not the 68th where executives lived, but high enough that he could see the city spreading out below him. His desk was smaller than the one he'd had at Marlowe, but it was clean, organized, earned. He sat down and opened the restructuring proposal Emily had mentioned. 27 pages of dense financial projections for expanding the job training programs to 8 new cities. Budget requirements, staffing models, partnership opportunities with local nonprofits. He had 4 hours to analyze it and make recommendations. The old Ethan would have skimmed it, approved whatever looked good on paper, and moved on. But that guy was dead. This Ethan read every line, cross-referenced the budget against similar programs, called 3 of the proposed nonprofit partners to ask about their actual capacity. By noon, he had a 10-page analysis on Emily's desk with 6 major revisions and a completely different rollout timeline. Jessica called him 20 minutes later. "Ms. Winslow wants to see you." He took the elevator up, walked in. Emily was reading his analysis with her reading glasses on, making notes in the margins. She didn't look up. "Sit." He sat. She kept reading. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, she set it down. "You gutted my timeline. Your timeline assumed every nonprofit partner could scale immediately. 3 of them are already at capacity. They'd collapse under the expansion. I proposed a phased approach. 6 cities in year 1, 2 more in year 2. Slower, but sustainable. That delays impact. It ensures impact. Rushing this would burn out the partners and hurt the people we're trying to help." Emily stared at him. He couldn't read her expression. Then she picked up a red pen and wrote across the top of his analysis, "Approved. Proceed with Carter recommendations." She handed it back to him. "Implement it. You've got until Q4 to have Phase 1 operational." Ethan took the document, stood up, and walked to the door. Then he stopped. "Emily, can I ask you something?" "What?" "Why did you really marry me 3 years ago, before all this? What did you see in me that made you think I was worth hiding who you were?" She took off her reading glasses and set them on the desk. For a long moment, she just looked at him. "You helped an old woman carry her groceries up 4 flights of stairs. I was having coffee across the street. I watched you do it. She tried to tip you and you refused. You just smiled and said you hoped someone would do the same for your mom someday. You had no idea anyone was watching. You weren't performing. You were just kind." She picked up her glasses again. "I thought if I could build a life with someone who was kind when no one was looking, I could be happy. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I wasn't wrong about seeing that in you once." Ethan's throat tightened. "I forgot how to be that person. I know, that's why I had to break you, so you could remember." He left before his voice could crack, went back to his desk, pulled up the expansion plan, and got to work. Over the next 6 months, Ethan built something real. He hired a team of 8 people, all from the community programs themselves, former participants who'd graduated and wanted to give back. He opened training centers in Detroit, Atlanta, and Phoenix. He partnered with local businesses to create apprenticeships. He spent 3 days a week traveling, meeting with participants, listening to their stories, adjusting programs based on what actually worked instead of what looked good in reports. In Detroit, he met a woman named Sharon, who'd been incarcerated for 12 years for a nonviolent drug offense. She'd been out for 6 months and couldn't find work anywhere because of her record. Ethan sat with her for 2 hours, going through her resume, helping her reframe her prison jobs as actual skills. Then he called a partner company and personally vouched for her. She started the following Monday. 3 months later, she sent him a photo of her first paycheck with a note that said, "I forgot what it felt like to be worth something. Thank you for reminding me. Oh, Ethan kept that note in his desk drawer. Read it whenever the work felt too hard. In Atlanta, he discovered one of the partner nonprofits was embezzling funds. Instead of just cutting them off, he reported them to authorities, worked with Emily's legal team to recover the money, and then personally helped the program participants transition to a different organization. It took 3 months of extra work he wasn't paid for, but every single participant stayed in the program. By month 9, the expansion was exceeding every metric: graduation rates, job placement, 6-month retention. Emily called him into her office one Tuesday morning. "Bloomberg wants to do a feature on the program. They want to interview you." Ethan's stomach dropped. "No, absolutely not. It's good press for Obsidian." "I don't care. This isn't about me. The second my face is attached to this, it becomes a redemption story instead of a program story. I'm not using these people to rebuild my reputation." Emily leaned back in her chair. "What if I make it an order?" "Then I'll refuse, and you can fire me." She studied him for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and called Bloomberg back. "We're declining the profile. If you want to cover the program, you can interview the participants directly. My director of community outreach won't be available." She hung up, satisfied. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. You were right. Now get out. I have actual work to do." That evening, Ethan was leaving the office around 8 when he ran into Emily in the elevator. She was carrying files, looking exhausted in a way he'd never seen before. "Long day?" he asked. 16-hour board meeting. They want to take the company public. I'm opposed. They're threatening to vote me out." Ethan blinked. "Can they do that?" "If they get enough votes, yes. I built this company from the ground up, but I only control 43%. If the other board members unite against me, I'm done." The elevator descended in silence. Ethan thought about everything she'd built, everything she'd sacrificed. What do you need? A miracle, or 3 swing votes, whichever comes first. Who are the swing votes? She named 3 board members. Ethan knew one of them, Gerald Hutchins, Old Wall Street. He'd worked with Ethan's former boss years ago. "I know Hutchins. Not well, but I know him." Emily looked at him sharply. "Don't. Don't what? Don't try to help. This isn't your fight. You made it my fight when you gave me a second chance. Let me make some calls." "Ethan, these people will eat you alive. You're not in their world anymore." "Good. Maybe that's why they'll listen." He spent the next 3 days calling in every old favor he had left. Most people wouldn't take his calls, but Hutchins did. They met for coffee at a diner in Midtown. Hutchins showed up in a $3,000 suit, looking at the vinyl booths like they might infect him. "Carter, I heard you were working as a janitor." "Community outreach director, but I started as a janitor, yeah." Hutchins ordered black coffee and studied Ethan like a specimen. "So what do you want?" "I assume this isn't a social call." "Emily Winslow's board is trying to force her out. I know you're one of the swing votes. I'm asking you not to vote against her." "Why would I do that?" "Going public means a 30% return for investors. I stand to make $800 million personally. And she stands to lose the company she built, the company that's actually changing lives, not just generating returns." Hutchins laughed. "Carter, when did you become a bleeding heart? You used to be ruthless. I remember you tanking a competitor's stock just to close a deal." "I remember that too. I also remember what it cost me. I'm asking you to think past the $800 million to what kind of legacy you actually want to leave." "Legacy? I'm 72 years old. My legacy is in my bank account." Ethan pulled out his phone and showed him a photo. It was from the Atlanta program. 12 graduates in caps and gowns holding certificates. These people got jobs because Obsidian stayed private and kept funding programs that don't turn immediate profits. If the company goes public, the new shareholders will gut this within a year. You know they will. Hutchins looked at the photo. Something flickered in his expression. "My grandson's in one of these programs. Different city. He got arrested for drug possession 2 years ago. Couldn't find work after. My daughter told me some company called Obsidian gave him a chance. I didn't make the connection until now." Ethan's heart raced. "Which program?" "Phoenix. He's working construction now. First real job he's had in 3 years. Hutchins handed the phone back. "You're asking me to leave $800 million on the table." "I'm asking you to help your grandson keep his job, and hundreds like him." Hutchins stood up, dropped a 20 on the table. "I'll think about it." He walked out. Ethan had no idea if it had worked. The board vote was in 5 days. Emily didn't ask him about the meeting, didn't acknowledge he'd tried to help. She just worked 20-hour days preparing presentations, calling board members, fighting for her company. The day of the vote, Ethan couldn't concentrate on anything. He sat at his desk, refreshing his email every 30 seconds. His phone rang at 2 p.m. Emily. "Come to 68, now." He took the stairs, ran all 42 flights, burst into her office out of breath. She was standing by the window, looking out at the city. "We won, 51 to 49. Hutchins voted to keep us private. So did 2 others. Ethan's legs almost gave out. "You're staying." "I'm staying." She turned to face him. "Hutchins called me after, told me about your conversation about his grandson. He said you could have leveraged that information to get your old life back, asked for money, a position, anything, but you just asked him to do the right thing." "I didn't know about his grandson when I called him." "I know. That's what made it work." She walked over to her desk and pulled out an envelope, handed it to him. "This came this morning, before the vote." Ethan opened it. Inside was a letter on federal letterhead. "The Securities and Exchange Commission has concluded its investigation into Ethan Carter. No charges will be filed. All allegations are considered resolved." He read it 3 times. "I'm clear. You've been clear for 6 months. I just didn't tell you." He looked up. "Why not?" "Because I needed to know you'd stay even when you didn't have to. That you'd do the work because it mattered, not because you were trapped." She sat on the edge of her desk. "You passed Ethan. You became someone worth knowing again." He set the letter down carefully. "So what happens now?" "Now you keep doing what you're doing. Expand the programs. Change more lives. Build something that lasts." "And us, what are we?" Emily looked at him for a long moment. "I don't know yet, but we're not nothing. We're colleagues who respect each other. Maybe someday we'll be friends. Maybe more, maybe not. But we're not enemies anymore. That's enough for now." Ethan nodded. It was enough. More than enough. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Emily." "Yeah." "I'm sorry. For all of it. For not seeing you. For being cruel. For wasting 3 years of your life. You didn't waste them. You just needed to grow up. We both did." She picked up a file from her desk. "Now get back to work. Detroit's graduation ceremony is next week, and you need to finish your speech." 2 years later, the Obsidian Community Initiative had trained and placed over 4,000 people in permanent jobs across 18 cities. Ethan's team had grown to 47 employees. He still taught financial literacy on Thursday nights, now at a center Obsidian had built specifically for that purpose. He'd moved out of the cheap apartment into a modest 2-bedroom in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, but it had a view of the park and space for the books he'd started collecting again. Emily had promoted him to vice president, not because of their history, but because he'd earned it. They had dinner once a month, always professional, always respectful. Sometimes they talked about work, sometimes about life, the gap between who they'd been and who they'd become. One night over Thai food in a quiet restaurant downtown, Emily asked him something she'd never asked before. "Do you regret it, marrying me?" Ethan thought about it, really thought. "No, I regret how I treated you, how I failed to see you. But marrying you, that was the best decision I ever made, even if I had to lose everything to understand why." "Would you do it again, knowing how it would end?" He looked at her across the table. She was watching him with those same intelligent eyes that had seen through him from day one. In a heartbeat, because it led here, to this, to becoming someone I can actually respect. She smiled, a real smile, the first one he'd seen since before the divorce. "Good answer." They finished dinner, split the check like they always did, walked out into the cool New York night. "You need a ride?" Emily asked. "Nah, I'm taking the subway. Old habits." "Good habits." She flagged down a car. Before getting in, she turned back. "Ethan." "Yeah, I'm proud of you. I don't say it enough. But I am. The car drove away, leaving Ethan standing on the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets and something close to peace in his chest. He thought about the man who'd thrown divorce papers in her face, who'd called her mediocre, who'd believed his own hype so completely that he'd destroyed the best thing in his life without even realizing it. That man was gone, dead, buried under 8 months of bleeding hands and humility and learning what it actually meant to earn something. In his place was someone quieter, harder, more real, someone who understood that power wasn't about what you took, but what you built. That loyalty mattered more than talent, that the people you underestimated could be holding your entire world together. Ethan pulled out his phone and sent a text to Marcus from the Thursday class, who'd just landed his first management position. "Proud of you, man. You earned this." Marcus replied immediately, "Learned from the best. See you Thursday." Ethan smiled and headed for the subway. He had work tomorrow, lives to change, programs to build. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't running from who he used to be or chasing who he thought he should become. He was just showing up, doing the work, being present, being real. The city moved around him, a million people chasing their own dreams and demons, and Ethan Carter walked among them not as someone who mattered, but as someone who finally understood that mattering wasn't the point. The point was showing up when it counted, doing right, when it cost you, and becoming the kind of person who built others up instead of tearing them down to feel tall. He'd divorced a trillionaire heiress while mocking her as mediocre, and in doing so he'd lost everything he thought defined him, but he'd gained the only thing that actually mattered, himself, the real version, the one worth keeping.